Hey guys, this is Shad Judice, and you're listening to The Art of Suffering. Our mess becomes God's message. In the Gospel of St. Matthew, Jesus had just left Galilee and enters Judea to continue his public ministry. While there, he is approached by the Pharisees and questioned directly about the realm of divorce under the Mosaic law of first century Judaism. As usual, when the wisdom of men is confronted with the wisdom of God, only men can walk away the fool. His critics test him, saying, "Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any cause whatsoever?" He said in reply, "Have you not read that from the beginning the Creator made them male and female and said, 'For this reason a man shall leave his father and mother and be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but only one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, no human being must separate.' They said to him, 'Then why did Moses command that the man give the woman a bill of divorce and dismiss her?' He said to them, 'Because of the hardness of your hearts, Moses allowed you to divorce your wives, but from the beginning it was not so. I say to you, whoever divorces his wife, unless the marriage is unlawful, and marries another, commits adultery.' His disciples said to him, 'If that is the case of a man with his wife, is it better not to marry?' He answered, 'Not all can accept this word, but only those to whom that it is granted. Some are incapable of marriage, because they were born so. Some because they were made so by others, and some because they have renounced marriage for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. Whoever can accept this ought to accept it.'" Here we see Jesus revealing his Father's creative design of the human person, both male and female, who individually, as relational beings, mirror the inner life of the triune God. After all, God in his essence is an eternal exchange of self-giving love, possessed and shared fully by three distinct persons. And if God is love itself, a lover always has a beloved, and their exchange of love often creates a new person, both spiritually and biologically. Married couples, a male and female who give themselves freely to one another in a one-flesh union, exchange self-giving love that is so real, 9 months later, they give it a name. The family, or what Catholics understand to be the domestic church, is the visible sign of the invisible reality of God's divine love in the world. Throughout the entire 21st century, this historical staple of society has been under attack from demonic forces that propagate abortion, contraception, euthanasia, and an intentional effort to redefine the human person through disordered sexual behavior. Sister Lucia, one of the three seers from the vision of Our Lady of Fatima, was quoted as saying to now deceased Cardinal Caffarra, "The final battle between the Lord and the kingdom of Satan will be about marriage and the family. Do not be afraid, because anyone who works for the sanctity of marriage and the family will always be fought and opposed in every way, because this is the decisive issue. However, Our Lady has already crushed the head of the serpent." Pew Research polls from the last few years indicate that the rate of divorce for those who are older than 50 years of age is significantly higher and has doubled in the United States since the 1990s. The American family is changing in many ways. Cohabitation is on the rise. More adults are delaying or foregoing marriage altogether. A growing share of children are living with unmarried parents, and same-sex marriage is legal in all 50 states. Amid these changes, 3 in 10 U.S. adults think it's a good thing, and that there's a growing variety in the types of family arrangements people can live in, while about half as many, 16%, say, well, that's a bad thing. But the largest share, 45%, don't think it makes a difference, according to a Pew Research Center poll that was conducted in June of 2019. Kind of reminds me of the people in the book of Revelation in chapter 2 that are kind of lukewarm, and our Lord spits out the people from that church because they're lukewarm. They haven't really picked a side. Today I'm here with an amazing man of God who has overcome personal addiction, divorce, and looked deep into himself amidst his own suffering to find a peace and trust in God that would have never evolved in his life without it, and now rejoices in the new life it has brought to him in the words of St. James. "Count it all joy, my brethren, when you meet various trials, for you know that the testing of your faith produces steadfastness, and let steadfastness have its full effect, that you may be perfect and complete and lacking in nothing. If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives to all men generously and without reproaching, and it will be given him. But let him ask in faith, with no doubt. For he who doubts is like a wave of the sea that is driven and tossed by the wind. For that person must not be supposed to be a double-minded man and unstable in all his ways, will receive anything from the Lord. Greg Broussard, the 54-year-old single dad and grateful Catholic father who stays close to the sacraments. He's currently a diaconate candidate for the Diocese of Lafayette and an exercise enthusiast. He and I began a friendship sometime over the past decade in passing one another in one of the top 10 health clubs in the United States, located in our hometown of Lafayette, Louisiana, as well as frequently seeing one another at daily mass at his home parish of Our Lady of Fatima, where he currently directs a 12-week divorce recovery program called the Catholic Divorce Survival Guide, developed by Rose Sweet. You shared a lot of your journey with me personally, and I've experienced something very tragic in my life that kind of brought me to my knees, brought me to nothing. And, when I in my nothingness, I kind of found God in that nothingness, because I realized he was God and I was not. And sometimes we have to lose everything in our life to find what we've been looking for. And the thing that we held on to that was everything really was nothing, but we didn't realize it until we let it go. And I'm a big advocate of trying to get young people and anybody that will listen to me to understand that what we do doesn't define who we are. And sometimes we have this identity that we've constructed for ourselves in our life, and then we hit rock bottom, and it all changes. So could you take a few minutes and explain to the audience how, before you could embrace humility within your own cross, what is it that you thought defined who you were, and how did you come to realize that that wasn't your identity?
So I've been a cradle Catholic. My whole life I'm Catholic. Made First Communion, Our Lady Queen of Heaven in Lake Charles. Was close to the sacraments growing up. Fell away from them in high school and after high school, and only started to come back to church through marriage. But it was only when it was convenient for us. We would go. Very superficial lifestyle. I was married to a good woman, 2 beautiful children from that marriage. But everything I had was built on external images. What I wanted you to see on the outside was who I thought I was. Successful father, successful husband, a good husband, beautiful marriage, fit, all the things that, like in your book, I want to go to the Growing with Eli, this paragraph in your book.
Are you? And you're referring to the third book in the trilogy that I wrote, the most recent one, right? Growing with Eli: Our Journey into Life and Light.
Correct. Yes.
In fact, through a text exchange, we've been talking a little bit in the last couple of days preparing for this interview. You actually sent me a picture of the paragraph you're going to. In fact, I have it up in front of me right now. So why don't you go ahead and read it? This is kind of me giving some internal thoughts about myself. And you told me last night in your text message, man, that was me between the ages of 25 and 40.
Yeah, without a doubt. It really, when I read this, it really hit home. So this is from page 63 in the third book, Growing with Eli. Throughout my teenage years and into my 20s, I had an obsession with physical fitness that became both a blessing and a curse. I took care of my body because I thought of it as an outward manifestation of the self-discipline and value that lived within. I must have thought that it signaled to others that they were in the presence of a successful person. That right there was about as accurate a description of who I thought I was at any given time. So, as family were growing up, kids were growing up, we'd go to the beach. Everybody in this area tends to go to the beach during the summer. So from January to June, I would really buckle down on my eating habits, my exercise regimen. I would stop drinking alcohol, which is a heavy part of my story as well, which we'll cover later. So from January to June, I would take care of myself, treat my body like it was a temple. And by the time we'd go to the beach, I was so fit. I looked great, but my family was miserable because I had neglected them almost fully for the past 5 months. And it really wore down. So after Florida, after the beach, I would go back to my normal lifestyle. So it was like one extreme to the next, one extreme to the next. And the family they didn't know how to respond to it. Good family, great wife, but it was really rough on them. So
Well, I mean, I can relate. There's been times in my life where I definitely neglected other things because I was too preoccupied with this external image that I thought I had to carry around. And one of the greatest blessings of Eli in my life was teaching me that that's really not what's important. And the really unique thing, I'm just going to go back to it for a second, is if you look in the paragraph that follows right after that in the book, for me, it was one of the most significant things that I wrote. And I think you're probably at this point now, after going through what you've been through with your divorce and all the other things that you've dealt with, your alcoholism and stuff in your life. But I have right here, I still value physical fitness today, but for a completely different reason. The ability to serve a little boy in a wheelchair who at times is not capable of doing it for himself. My whole mentality when I go to the gym now is, I need to stay in shape so I can take care of my son. But it's an outward looking of self-gift for him more than I'm worried about the image that I have. And, staying healthy is important, and, looking nice in clothes and all that stuff is great. But it pales in comparison to what I need to be doing it for, which is to take care of my wife and my kids, specifically Eli. And you have, in one of the questions you answered, you said, God took away everything from what I thought I needed to survive daily and what was basically my identity. And I'm assuming that the divorce and maybe some of the alcoholism had contributed to that. And you wrote that your lowest point in your journey was your divorce. So you mentioned it was your cross. And I'm assuming one of the factors was alcoholism that played a role in bringing on that cross. And I'd like you to share, at your discretion, what you'd like to with the audience. How did that affect your marriage, and how did it break down your marriage?
Sure. And I want to build on also what you said, the second paragraph from your book that you just read. My father and his father both died 59, 60 years old from heart attacks, coronary disease. So I know my days are relatively numbered. So I want to be around for my children as long as I can, to be there to provide for them. So I understand that physical fitness and health is a big part that I can add to it. So my lowest point from divorce, I would stop drinking for 5 months to get in shape to go to the beach. So in my head, I maybe thought I was an alcoholic because of my drinking issues. But at the same time, it's like if I could put it down, then I really didn't see that I had a problem. I thought it was other people that had a problem with it. It wasn't me. Well, what I've learned since then is alcoholism is a mental illness. Drinking is only a symptom. So in October 2011, my wife had finally had enough of the just irrational behavior. She had done everything she could. And so she asked for separation, and I was reluctant. I did not want it. And so for the next 2 weeks, we separated. For the next 2 weeks, I was in shock. I still thought that the marriage was going to get back together. I was going to get a second chance. After those 2 weeks, it started to set in that, no, she was serious. And that is when the suffering began. I felt like I had a sign on my back that said failure, because our children went to Our Lady of Fatima in Lafayette. And at the time, yes, there were divorces going around, but it seems to have intensified since that time. It's very common today. So I went back to what I found comfort in as a child. My mother passed away when I was 12 on December 8th, 1978, Feast of the Immaculate Conception. And I remember back from those days sitting in Our Lady Queen of Heaven in Lake Charles and finding comfort in the stability of the Mass, the beauty of the Mass at a time when life was very unstable. So I fell back into the sacraments. But the suffering was so intense after separation from October to December. It was so intense that there was really nothing I could do to calm the pain that was coming upon me. I ran into a friend of mine at Red Laurel's at the health club that you spoke of earlier. And he asked me, I told him about the situation, and he brought up the alcohol. And he said, why don't you come to a meeting and see what it's about? So I did. It wasn't my first run with Alcoholics Anonymous. So I went to a meeting, and what I found in the meeting was there were a lot of people going through the same things I was going through, and I found comfort in that. But I still thought I wasn't an alcoholic because of my ability to put down the alcohol for periods of time. But then it started to come into focus that the mental illness, the insanity was my problem. I was irritable, restless, and discontent, and making everybody around me crazy. So that was my last time drinking alcohol, was in October of 2011. And since then, the maturity in sobriety has grown because I didn't know what to do. It took me about 2 years of going to the beach with my children to learn how to have fun again, because I thought it was all about drinking beer, sitting in a chair. Then I learned it was about skimboarding and at an elderly age and spraining ankles and shoulders. So
it really sounds like this was, you described it as your Paschal mystery. It certainly sounds like it was.
It was intense. The suffering was intense for probably a full year. And then it subsided, so it took me about a year to realize that it was over when I threw in the towel. Then the anger came. And I tried to be careful with the anger because I didn't want it to come out on people I loved the most, who were my children and my former wife. Most of it I tried to direct at her, but I had good men in my life telling me, hold on, let's do this properly. So,
well, I'm looking here at and I'm thinking to myself, you mentioned some men in your life. I'm sure there were a couple people that in this process, between the time that you realized it was finally over and the time where you were still thinking it might have a chance to continue, somebody helped you carry your cross. If Jesus Christ needed assistance carrying his cross, there's no doubt we do too. So can you talk about some of the people who were like your Simon of Cyrene in your Paschal mystery?
I can. I met, who's a good friend of mine today. I met Nick in the winter or the fall of 2011. Nick Hebert, who was working at Our Lady of Fatima. He was a pilot and took a position to work for Father Russo at Our Lady of Fatima. When he and I met, I was coming out of adoration. He was going in. His wife had just been diagnosed with breast cancer for the first time. And she has since passed away. This past January 31st was 3-year anniversary of her passing. And she was a beautiful woman, a living saint. But Nick was suffering intensely, and as was I. And we developed a very strong relationship where we'd meet once, twice a week, and we'd go sit in the cry room at Fatima and just do spiritual grouping, lean on each other, pray, and just sharing one another's suffering. And I can't tell you how much that helped me. It was a great boost to my cross.
And I think, it's really cool that it was with another guy, because sometimes, I try to explain, I had friends before I had my conversion with Eli, and then I had friends that went through my situation with Eli with me. And because it was virtuous friendships, which is what this definitely sounds like, and, they're both pointing each other toward the ultimate good, which is God himself, and that's your goal, and you're holding each other accountable. There's a intimacy in those male friendships with people like that supersedes any kind of friendship you had with other guys before that. Am I right?
Absolutely. Both daily communicants when our schedule allows, and that love for the Eucharist and love for Jesus Christ in his sacraments is second to none.
No, it just binds people in a way. And I think you would say the same thing for somebody who's a man who's had friends his whole life that hasn't had a friendship like that. Those kind of friendships are transformative, and they leave a mark on you, an indelible mark on your soul. And my prayer for a lot of men, I'm in my early 40s. My prayer for people my age and for people a little younger than that is that they experience those kind of friendships earlier. And the earlier they can experience those kind of friendships in their life as men, the better off they're going to be in the long run as fathers, husbands, and men of God moving forward. There's always a turning point in a story like this. So at some point, I realized along the way that what happened to me, although it seemed like it was a tragedy, was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. I know this is a difficult question to answer. And I know that you would probably do anything if you could go back in time, knowing what you know now, and change things. But how has this crossed in your life? Instead of it being like this huge curse that drove you away from God, obviously it brought you to him. How has it become like one of the greatest blessings for you?
Well, the suffering was so intense. And yes, I have thought back on, things that I could have done differently many times. But, one of the things about the 12-step program is one day at a time, stay in today. And, before I got sober, I was trying to live 2 weeks ahead of time, 2 weeks at a time, 2 weeks behind me, just all over the place and not in today. So I try to live in today now. I do not regret going through any of the suffering that I did because it changed me so much. I don't want to do it again, but I see that it was so beneficial. And I can remember sitting on my knees in adoration, Our Lady of Fatima, my Curcia sponsor, Rusty DePrema. He could see the suffering. I mean, he could feel it. And he would come up to me with this smile on his face, and he would just say, Greg, it's going to be so beautiful one day for you. It's going to be so beautiful. And I knew he was right because I understood the teachings of the church on these matters. And I had to do my part. I had to continue to try to follow God's will, stay close to the sacrament, stay in a state of grace. And so I knew he was right, but I could not feel it. I could not see it. And slowly but surely, it started to happen. I started to have a good day here and a good day there. And to be honest, I felt really guilty about having those good days because I was thinking, how can I have a good day when I know my children are suffering? Another good friend of mine says, look, those are days of consolation that God has given you to build up your strength, to help you for the journey, food for the journey. And so I started enjoying those days, and they started to come more and more often. And the changes that have happened in me, I had no interior life before, literally no interior life. And now the changes that happened in me when I had no supernatural interior life before, God broke down my heart and gave me the capacity to love my children in a way that I never even fathomed before. It was such a hardened heart before that it changed so much after that I hug them now and I get teary-eyed because of it, just because of the softness of my heart. And I'm so grateful for it.
I think it's beautiful how that's kind of part of the resurrection of your story is that there's this never taking kids for granted. And I know I don't like to say that because it kind of sounds condescending, but I think at some point, every parent, especially in this country, we take kids for granted. We take a lot of things for granted. And we have to have those moments where we realize that they're not a commodity to be had, but a gift that was given. And we have to re-examine how we've received that gift and protected it and cherished it. And look, I'm not... I screw up 20 times a day. I went to confession this morning. I mean, so as fathers, it's hard, but I'd rather be an imperfect image of a perfect Father in heaven than not to have any image to compare the Father in heaven to. So it's beautiful to me that part of your journey has been the long-term perfection of your fatherhood through that. Does that sound right?
It does. And Chad, I'll hear stories. I hear somebody's testimony either on YouTube or in person that they never heard their father tell them they love them. And it just breaks my heart. I mean, my children get it shoved down their throats 5, 6, 7 times a day. And I get it in return from them too. It's just very common in my household. And I'm grateful to God that he has given me that opportunity to share that love with my children.
No, it's beautiful, man. And what you just said is a great transition into the next thing I wanted to ask you about is how is your cross and your suffering transform your understanding of love? I mean, a lot of time, and the way you choose to love now, a lot of times in our society today, there's this understanding that love is all caught up in emotion and sentimentality. And there's certainly, the 3 types of human love, and they're tangible and they're palpable and they're powerful, but they're human love. And the love that's spoken about in Scripture is the divine love. And of course, the divine love is there to elevate the human love, to participate within it so that our love becomes perfected. And ultimately, love is a choice. It's not a feeling. And I think we totally forgot that. So I kind of constantly bring this up with people that I'm talking to about suffering because I feel like people that have suffered have some insight on this, what I'm talking about here. I know that I would never have understood that kind of love without my cross. So how does that type of love flow out of you, not only with your kids, but now into your ministry that you do at Fatima with people that are recovering from divorce?
Number one, it gave me a ton of patience. I was so impatient before. And when my marriage fell apart, I wanted God to fix it immediately. I wanted him to fix all my problems immediately. I was pleading with him. And what I learned through the intense suffering is that God answers God answers prayers three ways: yes, no, or wait. And my answer was wait. And so it's given me a ton of patience, or it's taken away a lot of my impatience, should I say. The virtuous male friendships that you talk about when I meet my guys for, Saturday morning mass, first Saturday mass. It's nothing to tell them. I love you, man. And that's like normal, just dialogue between us. So the patience that it has given me has slowed down my judgment of people. And it's helped me to listen better, listen more to what people are trying to say, what they're trying to express. So our ministry at Fatima, divorce recovery, we have people that come to us in so much pain. And another good friend of mine, Stephen Kramer, who's a fellow parishioner at Our Lady of Fatima, told me early on in this ministry to stay out of the way, let God work. So Father Nathan Como, associate pastor at Fatima, helps us a great deal in the ministry. He's very good with suffering and with people who are suffering. So they come to us, and a lot of times these people just want to be heard. They have to get their story out, and a lot of them don't realize that there are other people that are feeling the same way they are and have been through the same things they've been through, whatever those things may be. But to sit there and listen to somebody who is suffering is a great form of love. And they see it that way. I may not all the time, but the responses that we get from those people is very heartwarming. They're very receptive to our ministry. And it's a very strong ministry. And I would like to add that we work through Father Jude Halfin's Office of Marriage and Family Life with Kelly Chapman and Brittany Seymour. They're very good with us, helping us out and getting us directed and giving us the resources we need for this program.
Well, I work with Father Jude at the Chancery, and I frequently go to confession with him. He's somebody who's a confidant for me there, somebody I approach for advice and guidance. And I work closely with Kelly as well. The Office of Catechetics works closely with the Office of Marriage and Family Life, as I'm a big proponent of theology of the body, and they are too, as part of a whole part of catechesis to understanding the nature of the human person, which I think is some of the answer to some of this disordered projection of human sexuality that's become so prevalent in our culture today. And it's kind of, unfortunately, it's even supported by a lot of Catholics. But Father is great. He's got a great demeanor about listening to and being able to walk with people. And he's got that background in psychology and sociology that kind of helps him also do not just the spiritual part of it, but that human side of it that's really, really important. What's one of the most, if you wouldn't mind, you don't have to use any names, but can you share like one really powerful experience or story from that ministry, start to finish, like how somebody came in and how they walked out completely different?
Well, I think a typical story would be, and you have both people who come through, either people who have had the divorce forced upon them or people who have had to leave a marriage for certain reasons. But they get there and they're just suffering. They're empty. So over the 12 weeks, a dynamic will develop between the group. And so it's a video-driven group. We watch videos, one per night. The videos go in order of shock, denial, grief, anger, family issues, children. So it moves on through. And so after each video, we have a decompression session. You can share if you like. If not, Father Nathan and I will carry the conversation. But as the dynamic develops, people start sharing and they start relating to one another and they become friends. And they see it's almost like a support group that a lot of these groups continue after we finish at Fatima. They continue doing things outside of Fatima. And you see them get there and they're wilted. I mean, their heads are drooped forward. And by the end of 12 weeks, they're like, man, is there something else we can do? They really connect with each other. And it just gives them a spiritual lift. We try to include Mass at Our Lady of Fatima before our classes, the afternoon Mass, and then walk into class. And they see the value of the sacraments in the classes as well.
Well, I'm sure it's their sustenance, right, for their journey through the desert, trying to get to the promised land. And I did want to, we didn't talk about this, but the Holy Spirit's kind of laid on my heart right now. So I'm going to throw it out here for you, and you can choose to answer it the way you choose to answer it. But I think it'd be powerful for people to hear. Obviously living, a single life as a dad, and a man that had a conjugal life in a marriage and now doesn't have that. Living chastity. A lot of people think it's impossible. I think G.K. Chesterton once said that Christianity is found too hard, so not tried, instead of tried and found to be too difficult. I think the same thing can be said about chastity. I've had to live chastity inside and outside of my marriage. I didn't do so hot outside, but I've had the grace to be able to learn how to do it inside my marriage. And I shared that in the book you just got through reading, Growing with Eli, and the beauty of what that's brought to my marriage. How difficult is that for you? Because I know it's difficult, and I know the sacraments play a large role in you being able to do that. And how do you manage that part of your life as a single man and a faithful Catholic?
Sure. It's a great question, actually. It's very important. It was difficult at first. When my thought process was disordered, thinking that I had to have it. I had to have the lust, the sex, all of these things. And I wasn't perfect, after my divorce. But in the last several years, I've realized that I didn't have to have it, but I wanted it. And I always stayed close to the sacraments after my divorce. And whenever I would fall, I would go right back to the sacraments. And, of course, my first sin was presumption of mercy in the confessional. And I can tell you that when you're living in a state of grace, it's palpable. You can feel it. As soon as you vary off of God's plan for your life, you start to feel it, okay? Especially if you have an intention to live in a state of grace, you start to feel it. And it never felt right. Living a celibate, chaste life now feels right. It's healthy. It's spiritually, physically, and emotionally healthy. And I'm very content. I have no idea what God has in store for me. I can tell you right now that I'm in no rush to solve any of the problems that I have, that I think I have. I tend to rely on God for those problems. But living a chaste life now is a blessing for me, without a doubt.
I think that's a beautiful answer, and it's authentic and it's sincere. And I just want to point out to people that might be listening to this that the church's teaching on a natural law, the upholding, it's not a teaching the church created. It's one that it inherited from God and it owes fidelity to in order to pass it on, adding nothing to it and taking nothing away from it. That the teaching that has been handed on to individuals in your situation, someone who's living a single life as a divorced Catholic man, is no different than the teaching that is being given for somebody who suffers from a same-sex attraction. It's the same teaching. And a lot of times that is never brought out, never talked about. And chastity is possible for people that are both heterosexual and for people that suffer from a homosexual inclination. And the church does not discriminate against people based on that inclination. The inclination is not the sin. It's acting on the inclination. And it's the same thing for a heterosexual who has a lustful thought and is tempted. That's normal. It's going to happen in our humanity, but it's what we do with that thought, what we do with that intention. Do we act on it or not? And I think with that being in the news right now, being in such a proliferated thing in our culture, this part of the church's teaching, which it inherited from the natural law and holds fidelity to, is not spoken about enough. So you're not only an inspiration based on what you're doing for people who are in your situation, you could also be an inspiration for people in that situation. So thank you for your transparency on that. Is there anything else from your life or your story, your ministry? It's been a good visit, Greg, that you want to share about this, that you want somebody to know about? How can somebody get in touch with you if they want to go to this ministry? Where do they go? Can they call you? Can they talk to you directly? Do they have to go to the parish? Give us some information about that.
They can call the Office of Marriage and Family Life of the Diocese of Lafayette. They can call Our Lady of Fatima, or they can call me directly. My cell phone number is 337-412-0349. And my email address is very simple, gregbroussard@gmail.com. We facilitated about 11 classes with Our Lady of Fatima. I received my annulment from the Diocese of Lafayette in 2015. And it was a sobering moment for me. It was somewhat sad because of the finality of it. This was right around the time when we started facilitating the divorce recovery classes. the healing was still happening at the time for me, but I thought I was well past a lot of the hiccups that typically come with divorce. Each time I facilitate a class, I can assure you that more things come to the surface that were laying dormant in me. And what God placed on my heart with all this stuff is that this is a lifetime healing. Divorce is so unnatural. Death is natural, divorce is not. So this is going to be with me until I die. There's no doubt about it. But I've learned to accept the things and to roll with them. And divorce has also taught me how to handle anger and sorrow, that when you have a bad day, it's not going to be forever, although it feels like it is, that a good day is coming behind it. Just stay close to the sacraments, stay with God's will for your life. So it's been a gift for me. After all the dust settled and I can look back, I can see where God's hands were all over the goodness of this divorce, without a doubt.
Well, I want to say it's a blessing to have you in this diocese. It's a blessing to have you as a friend. It's a blessing for the ministry that you're doing, because I know that there are a lot of people who are suffering in this specific Paschal mystery. And it's always great to have the opportunity to look somebody in the eye who's shared your experience, knows your personal pain, and is willing to walk with you. And now you have become that Simon of Cyrene for so many people. It's been great having you on the show today. Thank you for your humility and your vulnerability in sharing your suffering and how you've allowed Christ to work in it, not only for your own benefit, but I think more importantly now, and certainly based on your testimony, for the benefit of others. And once again, if you're interested in speaking with Greg directly, you can contact him at his cell number, 337-412-0349, or you can go to the Our Lady of Fatima website, or you can call the Office of Marriage and Family Life at the Chancery in the Diocese of Lafayette. If you like the show, please share the podcast, give it a rating, leave a comment. If you'd like to invite me to speak at an event, pick up any copy of my books, shoot me a message on social media, or go to my website, chadjudice.com. Remember, all proceeds from my writing and speaking go to fund Eli's lifelong medical expenses. And remember, we must boast most gladly in our weaknesses, so that the strength of Christ might be within us. For when we're weak is when we're really strong, because it always takes a Good Friday to leave behind who the world says we should be in order to rise with Jesus Christ on Easter Sunday and become the person he created us to be, a saint. Until next time, God love you.
In a world that says give up, I did not yield. I gave my all for your battlefield.